talk about best practices around the Enable backup solution, but it's not just the solution itself. It's all of the managed service type functions that Entree provides behind the scenes to make this piece of software a true service that you guys are able to utilize. With that, like Chris said, please drop any questions you may have into the chat session. I'll be more than happy to answer that. Enable is a public company, so I do have to throw up a little disclaimer here. We may talk about features, functions, things that have not yet been released, things that are currently in development. If we do so, I will let you guys know it's a forward-looking statement. And then, of course, please don't buy or license anything based on things that have not yet been released or completed development cycles. The quick agenda here, just a couple key topics. I want to talk about the current threats in the market when it comes to data protection. We'll look at how Enable Backup and Entree work to provide data protection that's secure by design. We'll go into backup monitoring, what the day in the life of a Entree tech or perhaps yourselves, if you guys are doing some co-managed data protection. And we'll go through questions and security inquiries, things that if you're not using Entree and Enable for your backup solution, that you're going to want to ask of your incumbent backup provider to ensure that you do have those same best practices and levels of protection in place. Finally, we'll wrap with data recovery, some of the best practices and things you need to know there. And once again, we're open for questions. Feel free to drop those in at any time, okay? The market itself has changed a lot. I think since I was on site doing presentations with you guys at your facility. Um, Everybody now is in this state of work from home. And while some organizations are getting back to in the office, and some organizations never actually fully got involved in the work from home, globally it's spread organizations quite thin. Security is much more lax in some areas than it was 18 months, 24 months ago. With that, now you've got home residential gateways, you've got computers that are nowhere near as secure as they were, pre-pandemic. In that kind of scenario now, you've got to think about the different approaches to data protection and data recovery. You no longer have on-premise backup servers or on-premise backup appliances. You don't necessarily have distributed AV. People aren't connecting into their office other than maybe through Teams or Microsoft 365. So they may not even be using a VPN connection. So a lot of those old practices around data protection, data recovery aren't as applicable as they were, like I said, 18 months, 24 months ago. The market is constantly being attacked as well. And you guys see this in the news, you see this in the paper, you see this on social media. If you follow on Twitter, it's a great place to learn about cyber threats and cyber attacks. So MSPs as a whole, businesses as a whole are being attacked and targeted much, much more frequently than they were pre-pandemic. When I put this original slide deck together of threats, I was pulling the growth from 2018 into 2019, and we were seeing detection surges, growing or increasing, by 10% at that point. Or, we talk about attacks where a dental office or an IT provider for a dental office got impacted, and 100 plus of their clients got ransomed behind the scenes. Some of the risks of managed service, having one provider that could have access to multiple environments, they're a prime suspect to go after. Enable as a provider of IT management software, we are a prime target to go after. Many of our counterparts have been hit, attacked, constantly thwarting off threats. If we look at where this is going, the 2020 landscape, you can look at the top 10 major ransomware threats that were hit there. You get things like Washington, D.C. Metro Police Department. You get the Colonial Pipeline, the Steamship Authority, Massachusetts, JBS, that's the world's largest meat packing producer. Those were some of the top 10 that were hit in 2020. 2020, we had, what was it, 300% increase in the amount of ransom that was paid to hackers from a ransomware perspective. And the type of attack now is a lot different than it used to be as well. It's not a matter of just ransoming the environment. It's now about exfiltrating data, pulling data out. So backup isn't good enough. AV is not good enough. Email security is not good enough. You've got to have this multi-layered suite of products in place to ensure that there's no one window or one door open that the bad guys can get in. Because as soon as they get a foothold, they've got access to everything. And you might say, well, I've got backups, but yeah, backups are only as good as the location. So if they were able to get in and damage the system, who's to say they can't get in and damage your backups? Delete those local copies, format those hard drives, wipe those systems. So you want to make sure you've got all of the pieces in place. And then, of course, what's going to happen in 2022? We're 4 months in, so we're a third of the way into 2022 right now. And when you look at the year-over-year growth here, or I'm sorry, the combined growth since 2019, you're talking about a 62% increase overall in security threats. So I don't suspect it's going to get any lighter any sooner. You've got to be aware of it. You got to take those extra precautions into place. Now, the things we're going to talk about today are best practices, hardening, things we've built or expanded upon over the last 24 to 36 months. These are things that Entree is already doing with your backup service in conjunction with us and in conjunction with you as the end customers to ensure your data is protected. So if you're not utilizing Entree today for that service, something to consider, and then take note, grab some screen captures, some recording, take a look at what we're talking about today and find out if your incumbent has these things in place. Okay. So as I said, Entree and Enable secure by design. I've worked with the folks at Entree for several years now. They are one of our elite Enable partners. Chris and his team have been coming to me over conference, over escalations, over recommendations, best practices. I get involved in the occasional data recovery, bringing a server back from a failed hard drive or legacy systems. A lot of involvement there. But when they've got questions, they reach out, and that kind of relationship, that two-way communication, is very, very helpful. I reach out to the team here as well to find out concerns, best practices around who they're using for local vaults or on-site cached copies of data, other tools that they have in their stack to ensure we're compatible, things of that nature, security concerns, and whatnot. So, given that, I want to go through those best practices, talk about some of the things that you should be thinking about inside of your organization. Entree's already thought about them. They probably built out suggestions and service offerings that could be tailored to your needs. Now, if you're not using some of these things today, it's worth reaching out to Chris and his folks to get a quote and see how they can be implemented inside of your org. Okay. We're going to start with the 3-2-1 backup model. This is a recommended best practice in the industry. This is not something that we built at Enable. This was actually built by a video archivist as a best practice back, I want to say, in the mid to late 80s. But the goal here, at a minimum, is to keep 3 copies of your data. So that's the production copy and at least 2 backup copies, possibly more. The more, the better. You want to make sure you store at least 2 copies of that data on different types of media, be it local disk, network share, a NAS device, cloud storage, so that you can ensure that an attack of one type of media or failure of one type of media doesn't impact the other. And then finally, you want to ensure that you've got at least 1 copy offsite. And here at Enable, we don't consider your data to be fully protected until you have that first offsite copy. We are what they consider a cloud first backup solution. So local only for us is not an option. It has to be off premise so that you have protection from total site disaster. So when we look at security topics, these are some of the things that you should be asking of your vendor. These are things that Chris and his team and I have talked about as well. You'll see buzzwords out there, things like immutable or air gapped or worm locked. And you might go in and say, well, hey, does your product, does your solution, is it immutable? Is it air gapped? Is it worm locked? And if you only get a yes or a no from your provider, don't stop there. Um, Getting a yes or no to these is effectively, it's a marketing term now. While there is an official definition, it's really turned into a marketing term because every organization, every vendor has a different approach to how they answer this. So don't stop at a simple yes or no. Treat them like something you're going to dig into a bit deeper. Basically, what I'm saying here is that a mutable or air gapped or worm lock means that the historical backups are not going to be damaged or changed by a bad actor getting access to the production system. However, it doesn't always mean that the backups could be deleted, can't be deleted, and it could mean that there's just a sufficient level of authorization required to get in and schedule deletions or to help control and mitigate risk. Okay. There's a handful others here. You want to ask about security controls. What are those security controls that are in place that's going to prevent a bad actor from accessing a centralized management console out in the cloud or locally on premise or managed at your service provider. Wherever that console, that single point of control is at, is where the largest level of security needs to be enforced. And they're going to come back with a handful of different things as to what secures that. Examples might include role-based security, least privilege access, maybe multi-factor authentication. They're going to have password rules to set minimum lengths and frequency of changes, and they'll have in-house things that say they're going to change every so often, or they're going to guarantee that they can't reuse them. Maybe they'll have a password manager in place, different encryption levels, and maybe they're even going to do regular penetration testing. Hopefully, all of these things in place and many more. But you want to see a full list, a full accounting of what they're doing to ensure that that application is secure. And you might say, well, wouldn't on-premise be more secure than cloud-based? Not necessarily. On-premise is only as secure as the background checks for the employees, or how frequently the key is changed or replaced, or the security code is changed or replaced on the building. And if these are sitting at your facility and they're just being managed remotely, then is there a hole in the firewall? Who can come in? Who has access to this behind the scenes? Who can remote in or VPN from a private PC on the weekend to access the environment? So they're only as good as that weakest link. Um, Other things. What happens if a backup device is accidentally or maliciously had its settings changed? Somebody comes in and deselects the C volume on your server, or unselects a mailbox inside of your Office 365 configuration. Well, if you're not looking at that on a daily basis, how do you know? And then, of course, who changed it? And then what was the prior settings so you could roll it back? So you want to make sure you've got things in place like device audits, undelete capabilities, rollback capabilities, and then, of course, some kind of notification or reporting that can show you prior history, prior selections, and it can be audited and managed on a regular basis. The final one here is about data retention and long-term archiving. Now, this is going to vary from industry to industry, site to site, organization to organization, depending on the kind of business that you operate and the regulatory compliance rules that might be in place. Are you private? Are you public? Is it a regulated industry or not? But first off, start with your business requirements as they may be, and then what you want to ask of your provider, and this could be Chris and his team or me here even today. What's that retention period that you must have for your data sources? What's the expiration date? How long would you have to retain it from a long-term archive perspective? Is there a capacity limitation or a cost tied to the number of copies or the available retention that you have in place? All of those could impact whether you are having the best possible solution or you have scaled it back due to cost or due to other risks. Now, we'll do a lot of things inside of our application, and some of these are going to be recommendations that I've already talked through Chris and his team on around securing the management platform. This is that centralized console, and you guys may or may not see or even ever have access to this console because it is a managed service. But recommendations around creating named users. So only individual unique users inside of the organization. Don't create any type of network operations center, no support at or help desk at type of logins. So get rid of all those shared accounts. If you have a shared account, then you have shared liability, shared risk, and probably even shared two-factor authentication. And you don't know when you look at an audit who was compromised and who got in and did something or may have done something that they shouldn't have. Limit your max users, your super users, or your admins, or your root users. We call them super users and security officers, but this is a great practice to have with any of your products in place. only certain individuals can do all of the administrative functions. And then if you need that function, but you're not using it on a daily basis or a all day basis, create multiple logins with at least privilege access so that you can log in at a low level user, do the things that you want. And then when you need administrative access, you're going to log back in with those credentials. It helps to ensure that if those credentials are compromised, it's not the high level set. You're going to also do things like limit API access or monitor your users for enforcement of two-factor authentication. Maybe delete the users if they haven't logged in 30 days or 60 days. Things of that nature. Constantly looking at those kind of security platforms and best practices are going to help ensure that this console is secure for your business, but it's also secure for all of the other businesses that are managed by Enable and by Entree. Other things that we recommend is, why you have a technician on site or why they're remoted into your systems managing and configuring, that they don't log into any of these centralized management consoles from your systems or from untrusted, unprotected customer devices. A key logger or um, uh, uh, ransomware or somebody that has unauthorized access to that system could inadvertently or maliciously capture a password or capture a credential or get access to a UI that was not logged out of. So always having technicians logging in from their systems or coming in through a VPN, coming in through a remote connection tool, and then passing secure credentials in and not copying them into clipboards and so on is the best way to go. We always recommend password managers. We do offer and sell one, but regardless of whose you utilize, I recommend it so that you have zero password reuse and they're using strong passwords, something that is 12 to 14 or more characters that is changed regularly and can't be similar to others or similar to your prior X number of passwords. Finally, forced logout or forced validation. So constantly after X period, revalidate your two-factor authentication. And if you do walk away before it expires, remember to lock your computer and log out. As you're working from home these days, technicians, your own individual systems, log out. All it takes is a child that wants to play a computer game, a cat walking across your keyboard, and you can get some accidental deletion. An accidental deletion of a PowerPoint file on your machine is going to trigger a restore event potentially with Entree and the backup side of the house. So any accidental deletions you can prevent is going to help prevent the need for data recovery. Now, we're talking about cloud access right there, but there's also the client side access. Everything that we're backing up has to be an endpoint at some location. So, what are the requirements to protect or secure those endpoints? The laptop, the workstation, the server that's sitting in a server room in an office that only has a handful of people coming in and out. So the things you want to ask your vendor, the things that you want to know that Nable and Entree have got in place here for this is to make sure that the local backup clients damage to those or access to those can't compromise data sitting in the cloud that's already been backed up historically, or it can't break future ongoing backups, at least not without the appropriate authentication and authorization. Um, so what we do in our platform and what you should require of your other vendors is that they require local admin or equivalent level access to launch the backup and the recovery applications. That you can provide full or limited access to that either through password or limited restore credentials for those that are authorized to perform their own restores or schedule and trigger their own backups. You want to have policies in place so they can lock out schedules, lock out selections, so somebody doesn't come in and accidentally deselect a data volume or a C volume that you might need for that particular machine. And then, of course, those audits once again to see who changed what and when, so you can revert back to those prior settings. Now, what happens to your backups if your production data is deleted? Well, if you delete the local C operating system or you delete an application or a user directory off of your machine, the machine may not be usable, but the data is still backed up. It's still protected. We can still recover that as long as the machine is bootable. File and folder, directory, application level restores right back in. And that can be done very unintrusively through the management console without you even being pushed off of your machine while the restore is happening. If it's a full system deletion, then yes, we're going to do bare metal recovery. We're going to create a virtual machine for you. We're going to get it spun back up, maybe even on different hardware or in a virtualized environment. Lots of different service offerings that are available with the technology, but that is up to you to talk to Chris and his team about what SLA you need and what kind of recovery services you would like to have available to you. But ultimately, if your production device is damaged, deleted, corrupted, or encrypted, that has no bearing or impact on the data sitting in cloud storage. That's one of the main differences between replication solutions or those sync and share solutions. You guys have got OneDrive. You've probably got some Google Drive or Box or a handful of other sync and share tools out there or replication tools. Those are only as good as the last corruption, deletion, or encryption. You accidentally delete data in your OneDrive. Well, it's going to propagate over and ultimately be deleted from the OneDrive cloud and be deleted from any other devices that are synchronized to that account. You start sharing those accounts, company OneDrive accounts. Somebody could accidentally go in and delete something that they didn't mean to, and if you don't catch it right away, then you may not have a recourse. So don't think of those sync and share tools as backup. They're convenient, and they might be great if it's the only thing you have. But if you only rely on that, you are putting yourself in a risky place. Now, what happens if the backup manager agent is deleted? So nothing's been damaged, but they just uninstalled the software. Well, the nice thing is that you've got to have some level of administrative control today on most systems to be able to uninstall applications. Um, the nice thing though is even with the application uninstalled, it's still visible and manageable from the backup.management console, the centralized console that Chris and his team have access to. So from there, they can see a device hasn't checked in, check the heartbeat, they can see the history, all of that is preserved. They can trigger alerts based on machines that haven't checked in 24 hours, 48, 72, 96. If it's a server, if it hasn't checked in 24 hours, I'd be concerned. You're going to want to look for a heartbeat. If it's a workstation, 7 days, 9 days, maybe. You figure an employee goes on vacation, they take the weekend before, they take the weekend after. Maybe it was a long weekend. So somewhere around that 7, 9, maybe even 12-day period is the worst case that I would say, hey, this workstation has been offline for a very long period of time, but we've got access to automation so that we can monitor and track that information and start to trend and see which machines are outside of a predefined period. And then I think finally here it's about local caches. Now I mentioned we're a cloud first backup. We want to have an offsite copy, but we also allow local copies. It's a backup cache. It's a restore cache. We call it a local speed vault. Entree does this, I think, predominantly on Buffalo NAS storage, if I remember correctly, unless that's recently changed. Um, and with a local speed vault, you get not only a cloud copy, but you get this optional local vault copy that you can use to speed your restores or to speed your local backups, shrink your backup window, help preserve bandwidth, and cut down on resource utilization during the day if you've got constrained environments. Now, if you want to have that 3-2-1 backup model, having a local speed vault in place is a great way to do that because it gives you an additional redundant copy of your data at a place that allows restore speeds at LAN speeds instead of WAN speeds. If you've got gigabit fiber and gigabit local, not a big deal, but it's still a redundant copy. If you're constrained though to 40, 50, 100 megabit up or down, then having a local speed vault at no additional cost from a software perspective. Maybe you're going to lease or buy the NAS appliance. You're going to utilize disk storage you have in place already, external USB hard drives, a server, a SAN, all kind of different offerings there, direct attached storage, DAS, network attached storage, NAS devices, or SAN storage can all be utilized for this local cache. We're going to provide recommendations around how you secure that. You want to make sure that it's not an open environment and it's secure from ransomware, that you can handle disk failure. So single drive, external USB drives, while they're usable, they're prone to being corrupted by ransomware or drive failure, slow because of the single spindle. And then, of course, failures. Once again, single spindle, USB 2 or USB 3 plugged into USB 2 port. While it is nice to have a second copy, if it's not fast, it might not meet up to your service level and your timelines. Other recommendations here: take it off the network, or at least off of the domain. So a NAS device that's sitting in a work group environment with its own unique set of credentials and security. It's going to help ensure that if the network is compromised, then at least the local backup copies are not going to be compromised. You can use those to do parallel restores. Restoring 5 or 10 machines all at the same time, which would definitely not be possible in a limited bandwidth environment. Let me do a quick time check here to see how I'm doing. I think I'm doing great. Um, Architecturally speaking, the Nable backup solution is distributed. We've got centralized management servers that control the brains, the scheduling, the organization of all of the backups that we manage and monitor. We've got distributed storage nodes in regional data centers. That's 30 plus data centers in 17 countries on 5 continents. That's several hundred petabytes of data under management today. And that's after it's been deduped, compressed, and encrypted. So much, much more of that when you look at total restorable data sizes. We don't carve any holes into your network. Everything that we do communicates outbound over port 443. That's a normal SSL or a TLS 1.2 tunnel. Think of it as a secure gateway, outbound communication to your storage nodes. If we need to talk to that device, manage it, configure it, what we do is we talk to the storage node as well, and we open up a reverse tunnel through a mutual connection or mutual handshake. It means that we can get in and do management without having to make a hole that a bad actor could come in and take advantage of. Everything AES 256-bit encryption secured locally on the client, all data in motion, all data in rest encrypted. There's other things in place here too, like Cloudflare to help prevent denial of service attacks. We give you access to the IP addresses or the domain names for the various storage servers, so we can secure it or lock it down when it comes to your firewalls, your GeoIP filtering, and so on. So lots of ways to control or lock or even dial this down even further to ensure that outbound communication is going to be constrained and restricted to only the systems that you want it to be. Now, I mentioned data centers. This is the list of data centers here. The largest set of data centers that we're going to have are going to be in the United States. It's also where we carry the largest number of data center certifications. So you can rest assured that the data is secure and the data centers do meet the various ISO 27001 or NIST or PCI compliance levels. They get regular SOC 2 and SOC 1 type reports that are performed to show the data centers are secure, restricted access, redundant power, backup generators, and then of course all of our storage there is going to be redundant disk in a RAID environment or uh, a ZFS Z2 RAID configuration, redundant network connections coming into multiple carriers so that we can handle outages and potential downtime. If you're ever approached or asked by your ransomware, your cyber insurance providers, are you testing your backups? Are you having regular backups offsite? Is it in a secure environment? Is it encrypted? We can get this type of compliance report information for you. Work through Chris and his team. They'll get our security teams involved. We can provide you with a list of where your data is being stored, regions, data centers, compliance reports, things of that nature. So there is a formal request process for that one, and it should be a very, very quick turnaround. Finally, the tuning side of the backup is something that Chris's team is going to be working on as well. They're going to go in and do additional things to ensure your backups are optimized. That may be coming in and excluding the antivirus from the backup selection or the patch folder or the browser cache, temporary internet files, things of that nature. Maybe even going in further because of your limited bandwidth or constraints in your environment, limiting it so that they're not backing up the iTunes directories, or they're only doing backups possibly of certain specific document types or directory structures. Maybe they're excluding backup from AV. That's the inverse. And that would mean that you don't want to have your antivirus product constantly scanning the backup solution, creating additional network traffic, additional disk and memory utilization. You can see a 2x or even a 3x hit sometimes if you've got active live antivirus that isn't able to properly identify or filter or determine that it's backup traffic that's running on those systems each and every night. You want to think about excluding backups of backups. Maybe you've got multiple backup applications. You do SQL dumps to disk, or you've got SQL replication or Hyper-V replication that's going off site. Those are effectively dumps to zip files. Backups of backups create environments where you can't get a lot of additional compression or dedupe, and it's going to take a much, much longer time to process. Normally, you're creating complexity by doing a backup of a backup. We recommend that you look at those, filter those, and exclude them so that you still have both types, but you're not chasing your tail by trying to back up the other one. We'll also talk about things like best practices around exclusions. And I've done this with his team recently, where we come in and look at virtualization. How are you backing up the VMs, the Hyper-Vs, the VMwares? Do you back up at the host? Do you back up at the guest? Do we grab it as part of the file system? Making sure we don't double or triple select some of this data sometimes, or create a circular type of logic that could cause slower restores because of the amount of data selected. Same thing can be said for SQL. Back it up at the agent level, not the file level. If you're dumping it to disk, don't back that up unless it's the only copy of the only viable source. Exchange, how are you protecting it? At the server level, in the Office 365 side of the house, do you grab the information stores, do you grab the logs, or do you get it as part of a file and folder backup? How we configure the firewalls that optimal in and outbound communication, the GIP blocking, what countries, what regions, and maybe Entree's helping with your firewalls and your other configurations there as well. They'll know the best possible configurations in place to ensure that backup is playing nicely with everything else inside of your organization from a security perspective, whether it be ransomware or endpoint and disaster recovery rollback and so on. Typically, you're going to allow at least your local region or country, region of origin, and we will allow or want you to open up certain connections to resource servers that are global enable resources, which would be in the Netherlands from our management service perspective. And then we do utilize some Amazon Web Service instances around security and licensing that are based out of Ireland, European Union West, I believe. Once again, nothing to do on your side. All tools, tips, configurations, and things that Entree's already taken into account to make sure your environments are working the best that they can. They're also doing proactive monitoring. And proactive monitoring is what their day-to-day looks like, so that when they come in, they've got a list of systems that have got problems, solutions that haven't checked in, and it's all about managing by exception. Looking across the hundreds or thousands of devices to say, these are the 14 that have some kind of problem. They're underprotected. They're at risk. Maybe you're tracking the growth on them, or you see changes that are happening on these systems, and you want them to be highlighted and brought forward. And we can do that through filters in the UI here. Just by clicking on pieces of the pie chart, we'll get asset filters. Look at servers, look at workstations, look at Office 365, because they'll have different SLAs in most organizations. Filter on success or failure or currently running or systems with no backup. So we can see exactly those machines and start work to take action there. And then, of course, working with machines that are online first to ensure that the online systems are being backed up properly, but also periodically looking at the machines that haven't checked in to determine, is it offline for a reason? Did somebody uninstall the software? Does it have a heartbeat? Do we need to redeploy, reconfigure, or open up a firewall port? Um, Other types of things you're going to see here in a situation like this, they might be tracking your backup on Windows 7 and Server 2008 machines, and probably actively asking you to get off of that type of hardware and move to new modern systems. While the backup agent and software will still run in that space, it does have a limited support window, where we won't be able to continue to run. And then, of course, Microsoft's already end of life support on these flavors as well. So while we keep the backups around so you can do recovery, you do want to try to get off of those systems as quick as possible and move to newer and modern systems. So we can track that and monitor it directly inside of the environment. Maybe you want to see change rates. You want to see servers been offline for X number of days. Systems have open file errors. Maybe it's a VSS problem or a crash, a conflict or a collision with another backup application. Maybe it's permission errors or disk errors. You've got bad sectors, smart errors, drives are getting ready to fail. You'll see that report a lot of times in the backup software when it tries to read that disk. And then hopefully we can get a completed session so if it were to fail, we could recover that system. And then finally, duration, runtime, and size. A large spike in duration or a large spike in the size could be a precursor or an identifier of ransomware, or that somebody added a USB drive with a lot of extra data, or things have been changed or misconfigured inside of the environment. The guys are also looking at a lot of other things inside of this console. So they can come in and add new columns. There's about 500 or so different columns in here. I recommend things like timestamp, profile, the local speed vault status if you have one, things of that nature. Um, but with those 500 columns, we can look at manufacturer information, model, operating system, IP address and gateway or configuration, the location. Is it in the right country or region? Error counts, sort, filter, trend on that. And having those 500 columns, it means that I can build customized views that are now very specific to an end customer, or that are going to be utilized by a technician to monitor for change or flag and alert. The tech doesn't have to remember to go in and sort and filter and slice and dice. He can go straight to a view that he's saved in his dashboard that's going to be the exact set he needs for the daily task he's about to perform. Um, with these views, either over here on the right-hand side, I can look at disaster recovery. I can look at success under or outside of a particular window. How many restores were completed? Build my own new ones, set these up to go into an email view, which I'll show here in just a second. But I could also export this data out. So I could come in and dump out a custom report, provide an end of week, end of month, end of quarter, or something for a quarterly business review. Lots of other ways to pull data out here to provide or prove that compliance or to create a pick list to go to work from a resolution perspective. We want to drop in the email because you don't want to forget about this. Well, we take the view and we assign it to a scheduled email. So now the tech inside of Entree or possibly in someone inside of your organization can now get an email view that's going to be sent to your personal email address that you can opt in or opt out of at any time. Monday through Friday or a couple days a week at 6 a.m. or 4 p.m. And it's going to give you that list of completed, that list of success, the list of workstations, the list of servers, any newly added devices or domains, things of that nature. So that way you've got the exact audit or compliant pieces you need, and you're not constantly bugging or asking somebody for another report, another output. They can set it, save it, and forget it, and you'll get those coming in constantly. Um, Something else that's at their fingertips are device audits, and I mentioned audits a couple times during the hardening and the security side. Having these audits mean that we can come in here and see, since the device was created, a local user came in and set the local speed vault password, and then came back in here a couple days later and updated or replaced that password. We can see here where we filtered once again on password, but we're looking at they set a GUI password to prevent or lock the ability to log into the local graphical client here. So having multiple passwords on the system, not only do we get that, but we can see there's a hash. So while I don't show you the password, that would be insecure, I actually take the password, I hash it, and give you the first couple digits of the hash. So while it's great that they've set different passwords or set passwords in here, we could actually audit and see that they set the password exactly the same every time. So they didn't come in and replace it; they just reset it back to the one that it was. So having that visibility lets you see, are they following best practices or are they just trying to be convenient? Um, and you can use that to go through an audit, roll back a change, undo a change, or help control and enforce security. So as we wrap up here, we talk about the data recovery side. And then once again, if there are questions, feel free to drop them into the questions or chat session. The data recovery side is about ensuring that when you need to get your system back up and running, that file, folder, application, or the full machine running, that you have options. At the core of Enable Backup, we're a file and folder and a system state product. That means that I can take that file backup and the system state information, which has partition and maybe Active Directory and user information, and I can synthesize a virtual machine or a bare metal recovery from that. What that looks like is a whole set of different restore options that could be either reactive after you've had a data loss or experienced a ransomware or a failure or hardware issue, or they can be proactive. Proactive meaning as soon as you have a failure, then you're going to contact Entree and flip over to a standby virtual machine sitting on a hypervisor someplace, maybe at your facility, on a piece of on a Hyper-V server or a VMware box, or maybe a loader box that's coming from Entree, or a system hosted in their environment, or a system running in an Azure cloud or other colo location. Having access to granular restore for file and folder restores, application restores, bring back the entire SQL database or the Exchange server, or volume recovery. I want to, C still bootable, but D failed. I want to put a new hard drive in and just recover the D volume. All of these can be done fairly easily. They can be done remotely by the Entree staff, and they don't require, for granular restore, you to do anything. You can be there sitting and working on your machine, and they can take care of those restores without impacting your day to day on that server, on that workstation. For full system, those are a little bit more intrusive, or they can be, because you've had a failure and now you need to take your physical box and convert it to a virtual for temporary purposes. It's reactive. You call them after the failure and they're going to start the restore, and it could take 2 hours, 4 hours, 16, 24, 72 hours in some cases. If it's a large server with multiple terabytes of space in use, and if you don't have a local speed vault or you don't have good internet connections, but they're trained to identify those things as well. If you've got latency, if you've got low internet speeds, they're going to recommend a local speed vault. So you've got local cached copies that you can help utilize for restore. Or if you need to be up and running, within an hour or 2 hours of an identified failure, and once you've decided not to troubleshoot any longer, then having a standby server or a standby virtual machine that you can spin up with last night's point in time backup on it are great options that can be made available. Once again, talk to Chris and his team around pricing, licensing, and availability, and he can give you the best possible options for your particular environment. Finally, be proactive. I would imagine all of you have got some reason or expectation of maintaining business insurance, probably some form of ransomware or cyber insurance policy as well. And most of those policies now are asking you questions like, do you have offsite backups? Is it running at least daily? Are you retaining them? And then finally, are you testing them? And testing is something that can be done a couple different ways. It can be done manually, meaning that you're going to trigger and spin up a restore, maybe at your side. Maybe it's a service that you're going to have Entree performed for you. It can be automated, once again, at your environment or at Entree's, or it can be done in a hosted environment as part of an Enable hosted service where we test it for you offsite in the Enable cloud. So the key thing here is, if you are required to have some form of recovery testing, my recommendation is that you test your recovery at half of your base retention. So if you're maintaining 30 days worth of retention, I'm going to recommend you do a recovery test every 15 days to help ensure that you've got the ability to reboot a system following patches and updates and mandatory cycles. If you've got 60 or 90-day retention, then at least monthly recovery testing cycles in place. And these can be automated systems where it boots and generates a screenshot for you and emails it out or puts it into a console. Many of these types of things are going to have some type of additional cost associated to them, because it is additional hardware where there's testing involved. It's additional bandwidth. It's additional man hours on Chris's team to spin those environments up or provision and license the operating systems or the hardware, the hypervisors that they need. But it is also peace of mind. It is the equivalent of opening the refrigerator door to see the light come on. So that way, or you've got a good expectation that the light came on, the refrigerator's cooling, it's running, and that milk is going to be cold, and the milk's going to be good. Now, maybe it's not a sniff test, maybe it's not a date check, although we do get deep and granular into some of these as well. It doesn't fully replace the occasional full disaster recovery test where you simulate a failover. You shut down a production server, you fail over an environment, you perform a full disaster recovery, you start the stopwatch to see how long it takes, and you get your users to log in. and make sure they can do the business functions that they need and help identify where those weak links are. Maybe it's VPN licenses. Maybe it's users with access to laptops. Maybe it's users that don't have roaming profiles or they don't even have good internet in their home offices that are going to be the bottleneck. But doing those DR tests help identify beyond having the data, can you continue to do your business in the event that your production site or your home office is not available? So what we're seeing on the screen here is our hosted recovery testing dashboard. So you can look at your servers and your locations and determine where they're being recovered to. And of my devices, 82% recovered successfully. One had some errors. I've got 5 that are currently in progress. And then you can see how long it took for those average restores to complete a full rebuild of a virtual machine. And then, of course, how many of them were able to restore in less than an hour versus greater than 24 hours. So I think that's about all I have. I've got this final slide to wrap up here. The goal with Enable Backup was to provide a cloud first based solution that was going to be simple to use, powerful, and affordable. Something that you could add and expand your usage without having to buy expensive on-premise backup servers or go out and roll a truck and bring a technician on site in order to do deployments and lengthy configurations. Something that could be spun up remotely just via remote access and remote management into your infrastructure so that new systems aren't delayed based on availability of a technician. We've also added in functionality for critical business documents protection, very, very inexpensive licenses that do 99 different file extension types for your workstations and your business documents. We've got Office 365 protection. That's your Mail, your OneDrive, and your SharePoint. And all that's managed from that single web-based dashboard so that Chris and his team can see exactly what's under management inside of your organization from one place without, once again, having to remote into your infrastructure. Some key differentiators here, like I said, one console, it's cloud storage included. There's no license cost plus storage costs involved here. It's one vendor and one product. We're not outsourcing any pieces of this to anybody else. It's not technology that we've licensed or OEM from somebody else. It is our technology, and it is, as I mentioned, secure by design. So with that, I think we are all wrapped up. I know Chris mentioned that there is a end of session survey you guys are going to be accessing. Yeah, takeaways. If you've got questions, inquiries, you'd like to know more, reach out to Chris and he can get the right conversations going. If he needs to bring me in for any additional consulting, I'm more than happy to talk to you guys on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eric. Very much appreciated. I think we've seen, based on this, backup is no longer a kind of set and forget type solution. And I think we've all heard the terminology or the quote. Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. Backup and Enable is our plan on the back end. And when we need to recover and we need to get back to where we are, we've got a number of different features that can help us get there. And then we've got a dedicated team here at Entree that is responsible just for reviewing the backup. It's no longer just put a tape in and hope the tape works the next time we need it. There's a lot of different features that come along with this. And as Eric mentioned as well, I fill out a number of different cyber insurance applications, and it's always a much easier conversation when I can say, okay, well, we have our Enable Net Monitor Entree backup solution in place. I can answer this confidently. I know I can get your data back, and I know I can help you guys to recover from those types of situations. So there will be a survey that will be emailed out to you afterwards. Again, if you do have any questions on this or any other of our Net Monitor proactive management solutions, please reach out to me. Let me know. I'd be happy to entertain any of those conversations or answer any additional questions that you guys have. We've got a lot of fun things coming up this summer, so be on the lookout for those. And again, TechX, our big year-end expo, Tuesday, October 25th. So, mark your calendars down for that. We always try to bring in as many different vendors and options that you guys can see as possible, because we do want to make sure that we've got a comprehensive plan and solution in place for everything, not just backup, but security and wireless and servers and PCs, obviously, when we can find PCs in today's world. But thank you all again for the time today. We very much appreciate it. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Enable. And enjoy the rest of your days.
Thanks, Chris. Look
Yep.
forward to seeing you guys in October.